Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to beautifully explain this incredible piece of Uzbek literature in English, the memoir Kafanses Komulganlar, which translates to Buried Without Shrouds. We're going to unpack its tragic history, but more importantly, we'll translate its essence into a universally understood story of absolute human resilience and the enduring power of memory.
So let's dive straight into the chilling reality these families faced during the Soviet repressions. Just put yourself there for a second. Imagine the sheer terror, a simple, unexpected knock echoing in the pitch dark. It wasn't just a disruption, it was your family being violently torn apart in an instant, leaving behind this massive void and a really dangerous new label.
This memoir was written by the revered Uzbek poet Shukrullo. It's his deeply personal, frontline account of surviving the literally unimaginable. And he didn't just write this to recount his own agonizing journey through the Soviet penal system. No, this was a solemn duty, a way to ensure the victims of this dark era, the millions whose voices were violently snuffed out, are never, ever forgotten by history.
Section 1. The sudden disappearances, shattered lives. Right at the core of all this terror was a devastating label: enemy of the people, or in Uzbek, Khalk Dushmani. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't just some legal classification. It was basically an infection. The second that label was applied, it instantly erased a person's civil rights, totally isolated them from their community, and condemned them, and honestly anyone even associated with them, to the absolute shadows.
For Shukrullo, this nightmare became incredibly real in 1951. He was abruptly summoned by the authorities under the guise of just a routine check. Can you imagine that? Being called out of your home for some mundane, bureaucratic reason, stepping out your front door, and boom, you're thrown directly into KGB solitary confinement. In the blink of an eye, your entire life goes dark.
Section 2. Inside the interrogation room, battle for the mind.
What's really fascinating here is the sheer, almost absurd contrast between what the state accused him of and reality. The state machinery was working overtime to invent these monstrous crimes, right? Branding Shukrullo as this dangerous nationalist conspirator. But the reality? He was just a poet. A guy who simply loved his beautiful literary heritage, reading classical masterpieces by Navali, Bedil, and Kodiri.
Take a look at this quote directly from Shukrullo's internal monologue. It perfectly captures the pure paranoia of his interrogators. To the regime, simple acts of appreciating culture, poetry, or history, those were existential threats. They weren't hunting actual criminals. They were literally trying to assassinate an entire culture.
Section 3. Families left behind. The innocent suffer.
Now we have to talk about how this cruelty extended way past the prison walls. The state didn't stop at the accused individual. They branded the wives, the mothers, the kids. They weaponized terms like kulak to legally strip innocent families of their homes, their property, and their basic dignity before sending them off into exile with literally nothing but the clothes on their backs.
And this wasn't just a bad year or an isolated incident. We're talking about a relentless, decades-long cycle of trauma. From the initial kulak exiles all the way back in 1928 to the devastating Great Purge of 1937, right up to the 1951 arrests. Generation after generation living under this suffocating pendulum of fear. The raw facts detailed in the memoir are just grueling. Entire families, mostly women and children, packed tightly into suffocating cattle wagons for weeks on end. They faced extreme starvation, sweeping disease, and the harsh, freezing climates of Ukraine and Siberia. And maybe worst of all, the soul-crushing grief of burying their own kids in unmarked graves in totally foreign lands.
Section 4. The living graveyard. Survival in the Gulag.
Shukrullo uses this haunting phrase in the text, Tariklar Kabristoni, which translates to the graveyard of the living. And wow, does it tragically capture the essence of these labor camps in places like Krasnoyarsk. Out there, human beings weren't individuals anymore. They were reduced to numbers, treated as entirely disposable labor. The daily reality of camp life is almost impossible to wrap your head around. Prisoners were transported in those terrifying black Raven cars, handed ridiculous 25-year sentences with absolutely zero fair trial. To survive, you had to navigate sub-zero temperatures, back-breaking lumber work, and the constant, very real danger of being deliberately housed with hardened, violent criminals.
It's a deeply sobering realization when you're stripped of every human right, living in a place where a stray dog actually gets more mercy than you do. How do you survive? Well, for Shukrullo and others, it was an internal reliance on memorized poetry, cultural pride, and sheer mental endurance. That became their only, yet incredibly powerful, silent act of rebellion against the system.
Section 5. A Glimmer of Hope. The Tides Shift. Okay, so the year is 1953. The sudden death of Joseph Stalin sends these massive shockwaves through the entire Gulag system. That dictatorial grip finally loosened just a bit, shifting the tectonic plates of Soviet politics. And slowly, amazingly, it started opening the heavily guarded doors for those who had basically been buried alive for years.
And honestly, the true beauty of Shukrullo's story is right here, the ultimate triumph of the human spirit. These survivors didn't just endure. They actually returned home and patiently rebuilt their shattered lives. They found quiet solidarity, they clung to their literature, and most importantly, they made sure to document the undeniable truth so it would completely outlast the regime that tried to suppress it.
This is exactly why Ka Francis Komolganlar is such an essential piece of world literature. By putting pen to paper, Shukrullo built a permanent monument out of words. He gives this eternal voice to millions of innocent souls who were denied justice, denied their homes, and denied even a proper burial in a shroud.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought. When a regime tries to completely erase millions without a trace, the act of remembering becomes an act of pure defiance. By engaging with these texts, we answer that question. Thank you so much for joining this explainer. I really hope this deep dive helped you understand the profound depths of Shukrullo's work and leaves you inspired by the sheer endurance of human memory. Keep exploring, and we'll catch you next time.